Motorboat? You play the motorboat? You motorboating son of a bitch, you old sailor, you.
Following program contains language and subject matter that you may consider unsuitable for children. Parental discretion is advised.
I'm going to pass the reins to Mr. Jackal, the new king of radio.
I think Jackal's Rubino, I'm not sure, but he'll give it to you good.
The Jackal.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the big show here on PSN Radio and SoFlo Radio. And right now I'm joined by a gentleman who has been on my show before. He's a legend in ufology, a person I met in 2016, and just somebody I love speaking to. He has years and years of experience. And anytime that I want to ask anybody about, UFOs, aliens, UAP, or about life in general, this is my man right here, the man who rocks bow ties better than anybody else that I know in the world of UFOs, ufology, or anywhere that I've interviewed, the one and only Mr. Rich Hoffman. Thank you so much for being back on the show, my friend, and you look great.
Well, you look pretty good yourself, buddy. It's been a while, man. It's been a while since we've seen each other, but it's good to see you again, and I'm glad to see you're doing so well, and you're like a Slim Jim, you lost some serious weight, man. You're looking good.
Remember, we're kind of like joking about it earlier. When we met in person in MUFON in the symposium, I was over 400 pounds. And not to insult Race Hobbs, because he's a buddy of mine, but they kept, saying, "Hey, Race Hobbs." And I kept looking back, and they're like, "Well, you're not Race Hobbs." And I'm like, "No." I guess, and they're like, "From the back, you guys look identical." And I was like, "Wait a second." Hey, shout outs to Race Hobbs. He's a good dude.
I love Race. Yeah, I've been on his show a number of times in the past too, but it's good that you have that connection. And I understand that. From the back, you probably look like Race and stuff like that. I guess I don't know, but I knew Angel. I know Angel big time.
Now, it's funny because I haven't been back to a symposium or a MUFON event because my health got in the way, so I haven't been able to be as active as I want to. But there's been a lot of stuff in the world of ufology over the last several years. This year alone, Rich, here in Florida, Bayside, in the beginning of the year, we had the event that happened where it looked like the entire police squad was out there. I've never seen that, on anything. I've seen gang violence in that area. I've seen all kinds of, stuff happen, robberies, threats to the airport. I've never seen that amount of police coverage at Bayside.
Well, that's pretty awesome.
I mean, that's pretty incredible. And the aliens that people are saying, they're like, what, 10, 20 feet tall?
Yeah. I don't understand any of that. It's not something I investigated, that's for sure. I've heard about it, but I'm just not really up to speed on it.
What's the latest stuff? It's something crazy, right? It's something like when you think about that, it's mind blowing because we've never had that kind of event here. Now I have talked to other people in personal life and stuff who were in the military in the 60s, 70s, people I've worked with. And they've disclosed stuff to me in private of stuff they've seen. I have a friend of mine who was part of a UFO down craft here in Florida near the police station in Homestead. And this is back in the 70s. And he was part of the recovery team. And he saw bodies, he saw a crash, and it's one of the least reported incidents. I don't think a lot of people know about this. It was mid-70s. He was, asked because he was very highly respected to be part of the recovery team. In fact, I have a book that I'm writing, and it's going to be in the book about my conversation with this guy because when we were at the symposium, you and I, one of the people there verified his story without me even giving the guy's name. And while I know that this was verified because I was talking to somebody else. I think it was Stanton Friedman, rest in peace. And we were chatting about, my history in ufology because I've interviewed Stanton many times. He was a good buddy also.
Yeah.
And somebody overheard us talking about this one incident. And I was telling him about what happened. I never mentioned the guy's name out of privacy. the person was listening, an older gentleman. He's about maybe 60, 70, or around there, and he just was listening, and he was part of like the folks that were there to give speeches. I'm not name names or anything, but he said, "Oh, this is so and so. I was in the military and I was part of that team. I know who exactly you're talking about." And he gave the first and last name, like it was somebody he knew. That told me everything. I was like, "That's it, pure verification." They don't know each other that I know of. When I was told this was back in 2005, and this gentleman verified it in 2016, no connection since then. And he said out loud, first and last name. Even Stanton looked at him like, "Oh, well, there you go. You got your answer."
It's really interesting. I've been at this now for like 60 years. I just celebrated in April my 60th year doing it. Growing up in Dayton, which is where Wright Pat was, I was hearing nothing but stories about, the stuff that they had at the base, that type of thing. And you'd constantly get these people that would come up to you and say, well, that they got aliens at the base, or there's hangar 18 or something like that they have. So you'd hear these stories, but, every time you tried to like look into it or like find out what was going on, you just never really could get any solid evidence or anything to back it up. And of course, over my, years and stuff, I've talked with many people that have talked about crashes that, and they're credible people. They tell me some incredible stuff. And I'm going like, wow, that's so cool. But again, we come back to the fact that we just don't have anything that we can go and say, hey, let's go look at this building. Let's go look at this hangar. Let's go look here. Can you show me a photograph? Can you show me something? Can you give me anything? And that's where we struggle with the whole thing. It's like, then it becomes a story, it's like, okay, well, I've heard stories all my life, but we need some evidence to be able to blow this thing wide open and get everybody to admit something's going on. Right. So it's a challenge for us, Angel.
Yeah, no, and that's something we've been dealing with for over 100 years now, maybe more. I mean, look, my good friend Steve Bassett calls it the embargo, the truth embargo on UFOs, and I believe that's what's been going on. I think this goes back, during the World War II era, the Nazi German scientists that we brought over, like Werner von Braun and these people that helped start the NASA. When the bomb was dropped. I mean, I think a lot of that played into a lot of the sightings because maybe our space brethrens got interested when they saw, hey, what are these guys dropping bombs? What's going on in this little, neck of the woods? Let's go investigate. And some of that is that. A lot of it, I do think, is people from other worlds who have been here for longer than maybe humanity in parts of the world. My good friend who passed away, Dennis Crenshaw, I don't know if you're familiar with Dennis Crenshaw, and he had a show called Unraveling the Secrets. And often we spoke about, well, what if there are aliens within the earth, right? He was a big, inner earth, hollow earth guy. He was the hollow earth insider. And we've discussed that, and we kind of both came to an agreement that probably most likely the earth is not hollow, because it makes no sense, really. Even he admits that, or admitted that. Rest in peace. But he did say that there could be very possibility pockets within the earth that could have people living there from other worlds, just overseeing everything. Admiral Byrd. Look at what happened there in that story. That's an amazing tale that most people, most Americans, most people worldwide don't even know about, and that's recorded history.
Think about it for a second, that 3/4 of our planet is water, and we really know very little about it. We should be calling it the planet water instead of the planet Earth because of that. But ultimately, because we don't know what's in the bottom, and look at how many UFOs are popping up out of water, going into water. It's very likely that you could have a base or something like that exists underneath the water, that these things use to come in and out of. And, it's not also a far cry. Look what we're doing with our robots that we send up to Mars. We survey them, we send these kind of devices to go and look around and snoop around and to see what we can find and stuff like that. that why wouldn't you some billions of years ago or something like that, you could have had an alien race that or something like that that's been on this planet for as long as we've been on the planet. And then if you look at every oral tradition and every written texts on the planet from different cultures over history, they're all talking about something that came from the sky, gods that are up there, that descend, and it's like those are all basically consistent stories that you get around the planet all the time. So to me, it's more like that we've had a relationship with these whatever they are for a very long time, and way before the 1947s with the Kenneth Arnold thing, and it's been throughout history,
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and
even in other countries, like India, they have the Vimanas, for example.
Vimanas, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you look at those oral traditions that are passed down, and they talk about things like the Vimanas. They talk about the Romans call them fiery shields. Okay, they were seeing them.
Yeah.
Then you have other kinds of historical records. The Chinese have been seeing them, and so it's complete sense that we've had a relationship with them for a very long time, and I guess we're just now getting to the point where we're getting some technology that allows us to detect them better, and that's why you're suddenly seeing all these military cases that are popping up, where they're suddenly popping up with this new radar that we've got, and we're able to detect, like even on the gimbal down off the east coast of the United States, that the gimbal and they were saying, well, we've got 30 of those on the ASA, which is their equipment, right? 30 of those, and they're just filming one of them, right? So I mean, it's like we're picking them up now, and so consequently, the next question is, can we use that technology to help us to get a better understanding about them? And we're actually getting there from scientifically. That's what the SCU that I'm with is all about, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, and we're ultimately out there looking to apply science to this. We're looking for technology tools. I've been in meetings with people from France doing this, all the countries around the world, and we're now connecting each other and looking at how we can use technology to help us figure the question, of what the heck these things are, right?
Yeah, and the website, just for folks to know how to get to some of the stuff you're talking about, is explore scu.org. So I'm going to label it out letter by letter, so anybody who's like, what? It's explore.scu.org. And make sure everybody who watches this on on YouTube, anybody who's listening live right now, make sure you go to that website. There's so much stuff in there that's really important. I played clips earlier of Trump talking about UFOs and what he kind of believes, doesn't believe, and stuff. And over the decades, we've had presidents, people in Congress talk about what they believe in. A lot of them are believers. Trump is like, well, I don't really necessarily believe it, but I'm open-minded. He's been saying that for years now. And he believes what people are seeing and reporting, because like he says, they're perfect-looking people. They're not crazy. These are military officials. They look like central casting. Military folks, crew cuts, serious dudes, and they're seeing these things. We've had them report over nuclear bases. I mean, that's a scary thing right there. We've had, like you said, underwater, things all the time being reported on. It seems like we cannot escape the subject. And what are your thoughts on the presidents, and people within Congress like Marco Rubio and stuff like that coming forward and being more open now? Remember, Obama was the first president who said Area 51 was real and openly said it. So what's your thoughts on that? Because that's important, I think.
Yeah, I think that the presidents are kind of like in an awkward place. I mean, first off, a lot of them, want to be, we still have the problem with the stigma. the stigma is that, it's that crazy stuff called UFOs, and and I'll be labeled a kook if I mention or take a position. So it's better for me to play like, like the role like you're talking with Trump, where I never really give you an answer, but maybe behind the scenes, and all the presidents have actually gone behind the scenes and pretty much asked, give me a briefing on this stuff, and so they've been briefed, many of them. But the problem is that, that's great, but again, the political career that they've got, or they want to be able to get elected, or they've got other bigger things that they got to pay attention to versus whatever, the UFOs or something like that. And so now we're starting to see, like, grassroots politicians, like you're talking about Marco Rubio, you're talking about, a lot of the other senators, Anna Polina, and then a whole bunch of other.
Correct. Yeah.
They've been more outspoken about the whole subject, and very much wanting to look into it. And so that's where we're having some significant, help or assistance in bringing this thing forward. And then the other thing is that you're finally starting to see in the last couple of years that it's getting into legislation like the National Defense Authorization Act, which is actually directing that there be a study, or that there be, and that it be a full congressional study, or that there's now like the requirement to report all UFO cases around all of the government, all government, now goes into this thing called ARROW, which is the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And that's starting to get reports, and they're starting to collect that. And we're excited because, we're hoping that, at some point, SCU will be able to raise its hand and say, well, we're here to help. You can probably do that and come to us, and we'll be glad to work with you all. Because we've got, like, now, Angel, we got over 300 scientists that are engaging in this.
Wow.
In SCU. And so, science-minded people, we've got some serious researchers, we got, every discipline that you can think of, in terms of, we got like something like maybe 30% of our membership have PhDs.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
This is where the equation's starting to really change, where you're starting to get, all these people that were up until 2017, they were in the closet. They wouldn't even mention it, and now they're coming out of the closet and suddenly saying, yeah, I'll talk about it. And so we're having water cooler conversations. I work with the Army Materiel Command as a contractor. In my 30 years with them, I've gone through and seen where this topic is come out of the closet. Now people are talking to me all the time. They're very open about it. And these are all great things. And so, for me to say that over my 60 years of watching the cultural change that's happened, you had Blue Book that was kind of like gave it some credibility, and then Blue Book went down, and then it closed it. And then the National Academy of Sciences came out and said, there's no science needed on this topic. Don't study it. Also, they said that it's not a national defense concern. Well, what are you hearing now? It's like, they're frigging over our ships. they're shutting down nukes. And wouldn't that be a threat you need to look into?
Yeah. And they do it so easily too. I mean, from some of the reports, like they just fly by and everything's just like, what's going on? It's like in seconds they can just take over the entire base. I mean, like, when you talk about technology, it doesn't even have to be boots on the ground, and they can just from their ship, in the sky somewhere, shut your base down. A nuclear base, shut it down for however long they want, and you're not in control. That's scary, folks, and that's not the Russians or the Chinese doing it. They're not that advanced. As as much credit as the Chinese, get for like the intellectual properties they taken over the years from us and used in advance of their own technology and the advances they are, they're not that advanced. Like they can. I don't think they can do that. Now, I do love the fact that while we're at war with some of these countries, we have open discussions with Russia going to space. We share the Mir, the space stations. We share with even our enemies. We have that diplomacy in there. And, it always brings me back to the Phobos mission from a while back when they, I don't know if you remember this case, where they took snapshots of the moons on Mars, and one of the last shots showed a saucer-shaped thing hit, I guess, the camera or the satellite, knocked it out of orbit. It was never to be seen again, but the last image showed what clearly looked like a cigar-shaped UFO. I don't know if you recall that. That's from the 80s that came out. And that was the Phobos 1 and Phobos 2 mission to Mars.
Yep.
So, and this is pre-CGI. So nobody can say, oh, somebody just photoshopped that. No, folks,
Yep.
no photoshopping. I mean, they would be working on Lucasfilms in the 80s if they could do something like that. That's how good, that image was.
Sure.
And it was on live TV. Like, they got the data, they looked at it, and they were like, oh, what is this? I think that's when they were like, yeah, we better look at this stuff before we go live with it, because
We just had interesting you mentioned that, but we have Ross Coulthard was
Mhm.
our keynote speaker at the conference we had this year, and he was here in town. I live in Huntsville. That's going back to the von Braun era, where
Yeah.
this is where NASA
Yeah.
got started, and he had a tour. He was telling me about this. He had a tour of the base that was given to him, and also he was in watching the ISS feed on live on some sort of TV, and he had some sort of like director or somebody with him, and he said, at one point we were watching as these lights go by the outside of the camera, and he said, "What's that? What's that?" And there was like, "What? What do you mean? Oh, we don't know what that is." And then you want to hear something interesting, Angel. He said that right after that, the feed went dead.
Mm-hmm. I believe it. Yeah.
Okay, it's like, oh, crap. So I mean, even Ross Coulthard had an experience when he was here, going over and looking at that. It was like, okay, that's well, there you go. You got an experience.
When they say Big Brother's listening, they always are. And and rest in peace to Art Bell, my mentor. I worked with him for several years before he passed, and I loved the man. I mean, he was one of my heroes growing up. I used to listen to the show all the time. Well, we got into our funny conversation once. One of the brief times I was able to pin him down and say, Art, can I ask you a few questions? Because you're so hard to get to, and it was private. And we started talking about the time that he had the call from Area 51 caller. He said he was a frantic Area 51 caller. And I had to ask him, I was like, Art, that was a buddy of mine who made that call, right? And he goes, what do you mean, Angel? I know the person who made the call, but how do you know him? And I was like, because he was on my show, and he shocked me because I didn't know it was him. And I've known the guy for years. He's a comic book guy, Brian J. Glass. Awesome guy. I mean, amazing comic book artist. And he called into Art's show back in the 90s, became the very famous, now known Area 51 caller, which till this day, everybody on YouTube still thinks is a real call. There's hundreds of videos on this. But this tells you how important the subject is and how Big Brother's listening.
Yeah.
The one thing I asked Art, and I was like, Art, that was a fake call. That was my buddy pulling your strings, and he was joking around. He goes, yes, I know. He even called back, and we had him on, and he gave me the whole Art Bell spiel. And I go to him, but Art, did the station really shut down? Please tell me the truth. Don't lie to me. And he goes, Angel, the only thing I will say is, in all my time on radio, that has never happened to me before. The station went down, the satellite went off orbit, and then it came back a little bit later, and we were back on the air, and I didn't know what happened.
Yep.
And then a while later, I talked to Brian. He admitted what happened. He was freaking out also, and I don't even want to touch that subject because that proves they're always listening. And I was like, thank you, Art. That's the most honest thing you ever said to me.
That's again, you're bringing up these things that are making me remember. But when I was in Dayton, Ohio, I was talking on a show, I think Bob Questel's show. It was some radio station, and we started getting into talking some serious stuff. I was talking about the base and stuff like that. And the next thing you know is that the station went dead. And I'm thinking like, and everybody was frantic. And when a station goes dead, a radio station goes dead. Oh my
I
God,
know.
you know,
Trust me.
it's like that's the end of the world. It's like, oh, everybody's
Yes.
scrambling around, running around, trying to figure out what's going on. And then it came back on a little while later and stuff like that. And then we were all like saying, I wonder if somebody didn't like what I was saying or something like that. It's like, oh my God. But anyway, that was pretty wild. That was my one experience where I had something like what you're talking about.
And let me tell you, Art he was a believer, and he was a real big believer. And I often wanted to ask him more questions about the subject, but I know, like, the radio stuff is a little bit different. But what I do love is speaking to people like Travis Walton, who I believe 100%. I mean, Travis and I have had many interviews, and I have no doubt that he went through what he went through. Over the years, I've become good friends with Mike Rogers, who was in the truck. We've had him on many times. Great people. I mean, these are stand-up individuals. Betty and Barney Hill,
Mm-hmm.
their story 100%. Also, I've interviewed Kathleen Martin as well. She's a
Yep.
lovely woman, and I met her at MUFON also at Symposium in 2016. And talking to these folks who are credible people, it's like Trump said, when you look at the people that are coming forward, these are like casting people, like, from central casting, perfect looking people. They're not crazy. They're credible. They come from, Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, right? And he's the guy responsible for bringing Jesse Marcel Sr. forward and talking about Roswell, which I think till this day, Rich, that to me is the biggest case in UFO history. The Roswell incident will go down, I think, in when everything is said and done, whenever we get disclosure, I think that's going to be the pinpoint to where everybody in America said, wait a second, something is happening, because they saw it reported on the news, on the paper, then they saw the government detract it and take it back, say, now it's a weather balloon. And then decades passed, and you had Stanton Friedman getting Jesse Marcel Sr. to, like, say, you know what? They lied to you. And I think that was the first time that America saw this subject in a way that it was credible. You have a gentleman like Jesse Marcel Sr., who there's no way you could tell me this guy who knew everything about the military and planes and stuff would mistake a weather balloon for a UFO. It just it doesn't compute in my mind. Was there aliens or some hybrid or something we're building with them, back engineered? Whatever the case may be, I often believe the Russians, Germans, Nikola Tesla passing away, all that stuff was influential in our connection with those folks up there. I think was the result of what happened in Roswell. I think all that stuff is connected somehow, and I've talked about that. I'm actually in my book that I'm putting out. That's a chapter that goes in there because it's such a fascinating story. Again, I think that's going to be one of the important cases. But it's talking to people like that. Again, Travis Walton, Mike Rogers, Kathleen Martin, yourself, Steve Bassett. These people, Robert D. Morningstar, who I love, is a good friend of mine. Mike Rogers, again, good friend of mine. You're a great friend. You're the people that really know this stuff. You've been around this for many, many decades, like you said. And the more I talk to people, the more I do my own research over the last 30 years. I may look young and handsome, but I'm in my mid 40s now, and I've been doing this for a long time. And what piqued my interest, and I'm sure I've told you this maybe in private, but was my own sightings as a kid. Back in California, I had one. I had one here in Florida, and with the one in Florida was with my dad present. And he was like, "Yeah, what the heck is that?" And my dad is not a believer. He's a very religious person. He's Jehovah's Witness, for crying out loud. And
wow.
so yeah, this kind of blew his mind. And
Yeah.
when you see it, it's so hard hitting, and it leaves such an impression on your soul that you're like, whether it's us back engineering a crashed a craft, or something that is genuinely being flown by aliens currently, or something that's been here on Earth that is extraterrestrial but was here before we were here. Whatever the case and the truth may be, it's still mind blowing. And what you guys are dealing with is incredible. I mean, I got to give
Yeah,
it up.
and going to your point, these things transform people's lives. They transform your whole thoughts about the universe or life elsewhere or whatever. I mean, and that's what I ran across like doing case investigations. A lot of time people are like they're shocked. They don't even know what the heck to do or what they saw. They're trying to figure it out. And again, it just transforms lives. A lot of the people that were coming in, even as investigators in MUFON, were people who had experiences, who were trying to figure out now how they could learn more, and so they became field investigators or whatever like that, so that they could go out and study it themselves and learn more. And so, I kind of like look at it like that's kind of like how I got started in when I was 13 years old. But it's not because I had a sighting. It was because I had to do a blasted book report, and I got a
No
D on it.
kidding.
Yeah, I mean, it's eighth grade science class, and I was late to class, and there was a list of topics, and the assignment was you had to do a 10-minute talk on one of these subjects, and nobody put their name next to UFOs. I stuck my name next to it. I didn't even know what it was. I went up after class and I said, Mr. Bayshore, can you please, what's a UFO? He said, unidentified flying object. I said, what's that? And then I just 13 years old, right? Eighth grade. I mean, so it's the first I'd ever heard of it, and so I remember going home, from school. I got a D on the report, and I heard Walter Cronkite talking about the case in Socorro, New Mexico, and that was April 24th, 1964. And when he was talking about it, I was like, oh my God, there really is something to this thing, and then a couple days later, I got my first book, first legitimate book on it. And it was the report on unidentified flying objects by the former head of Project Blue Book, Captain Edward Rubin. And so I read that, and I'm going like, holy crap, there's a project just up the street from me, right? And so I didn't even know that, and then that got me hooked. And and then from then on, I couldn't get enough in the way of newspaper clippings, books. And by age 15, I was giving lectures around the city of Dayton. So it was like, and then around that time, Phil Donahue had me on his show, and I was now on the Phil Donahue show and talking about the subject at age 15. So I became the UFO guy in Dayton, and so that's how I got started. Not from a sighting, I wish it would be, but because I
You were just interested,
and had a book report or a report that I had to do. So,
and it got you interested in the subject. It's funny.
Yeah.
I did 2 major reports when I was in high school in 9th and 10th grade, and we share this in common now that I know this. In 9th grade, I did a report on Hank Aaron for Black History Month, and I got an A. I'm a huge sports fanatic, and that was easy. I wrote that like in 10 minutes, and I got an A on it because I knew Hank Aaron's story. It's, great athlete. One of the greatest I ever saw, and I only saw like highlights because he was before my time. But the next report was in 10th grade, and it was about UFOs. And I was listening religiously in the 90s to Art Bell. Now, this is a funny thing. And people ask me, what, was the catalyst to get you to do what you do? For me, it was my sightings. The movie Fire in the Sky was huge for me because it kind of like showed me this isn't going mainstream. But then it was going home every day and listening to radio. And I was a weird kid. Kids would go home and play, get into problems. Now they got video games and tablets and all kinds of things. Back then, we actually would go outside and do stuff, right?
Wow, that's strange. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, right. These kids don't know how they have it now. It's crazy. But
no.
back then, I would go home and spend several hours listening to radio, or I would go to my dad's store. He had a little store, and I would listen to radio there for the time. And back in the 90s, we had Murderers Row on the radio. We had Art Bell on WIOD AM. We had Neil Rogers, George Rodriguez. All 3 of them are resting in peace. They're all passed away now. And Phil Hendry, who's a comedian. He's probably the funniest guy ever on radio. I don't know if you know his work. Outstanding, but that's different. He didn't talk about aliens. But funny enough, these are the 4 people on radio that really got me interested in radio. But Art Bell, Neil Rogers and George all loved the subject of UFOs, obviously, on the bell, and they all knew each other. Luckily enough, I got to meet Neil Rogers before he passed away. I got to work directly with George Rodriguez on the bell, and they were my mentors on the podcasting and radio stuff. These are the guys that literally showed me how they do things and taught me, hey, don't do this, don't say that, don't act like an idiot on air. Make sure you ask proper questions or just ramble on. Like I thought I was good at that. And because of their influence over the years, got me more and more into it. But the paper that I wrote, all right, it was about the Kathleen Martin, the Betty and Barney Hill story, and Kathleen Martin was the first coming out, and she was really like heavy on the topic because they're a family. And I wrote a paper based on like stuff that I read about her and about the Betty and Barney Hill story, and I got a B on the paper.
Wow.
So I actually got a good grade. The teacher was like, "Why'd you pick this subject?" Because it wasn't like your case was different. You know, you just had no other choice. I had other choices. They told me whatever you want to talk about. Here's stuff that we want. On the reports. But if you have something different, tell us. And I was like, I have to talk about this case. And the teacher was like, aliens? But what? This is a history class. And I'm like, now, let me explain why. This is historical. And I had to break it down to the teacher why this is important. Till she said, okay, I'll let you go with it. Talk about the aliens. Do your report on that. She gave me a B, and she wasn't a believer. She didn't believe in the subject, but she, heard what I had to say in my report. She read it. We had to kind of give a brief of the report in front of the crowd, which I think got me used to being in front of people and talking and not having, issues with, being scared or shy or whatever. And that helped big time. But, standing there and talking about this case and having kids look at me and not make fun of it told me that, these young minds are open to the subject. And that was something that I took away from that as a kid. And it got me more and more into the subject. And my dad and I had the sighting, and we were like, dude, there's something going on here. And over the years, I just kept on. And luckily, like I said, knock on wood, I got to work with Art, George, and Neil, my heroes in radio. So, it's been kind of like a progression into the subject. And I think the crescendo is playing, like Art would say, the veil's dropping. I think we're soon to hit disclosure. I know Steve Bassett has said probably in the next 10, 15 years, he expects it to like be more and more open. And, we have now with SpaceX, where, we have private people that are able to go to space. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he took Captain Kirk to space, okay? William Shatner, it's actually, he could say at 90 something, he's been to space. The final frontier. It's not just a show anymore.
You've been there. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I was going to tell you that, the other interesting thing about that lecture in my 8th grade science class was that the teacher was knowledgeable about the subject, and he's the one that put it on the list. And that's he's to be applauded for that, right?
Yeah.
The fact that here he is doing that. And then the other part of that was he was very knowledgeable about it, because when I finished my presentation and, just bombed it. He was asking me questions like, well, what about jet pursuits? What about them shooting at them? And what about this? And I'm going like, I didn't read. What was that about? I didn't know anything about like that. Well, that's probably why I got C. But here's the fun thing, Angel. Many years later, I was always on TV, radio around the city of Dayton all the time talking about this subject. And I remembered him, and I called him up and I said, is there a chance I could come to your 8th grade class and teach again or talk about the subject? And I went back, I did this thing, and I said, can we change my grade? He said, it's too late for that. But he was real appreciative of the fact that I did come back, and I said, well, this is where I got my start, right here. So
that's an awesome story.
It was a great story, man. It was wonderful.
Oh, but that's great. The fact you got to go back and kind of chop it up with him all these years later, like that's incredible. I wish I could do that and go back to my high school. They'll probably throw me out now and be like, "Be gone, crazy man with a beard."
Talking about aliens. What's the matter with you, boy?
It's bad enough we have, drag queen reading hour with the kids. I'm going to talk aliens, with the kids. We too much craziness. You get out of here. The world's upside down, and I think, I talked to Robert Morningstar about this when I had him on recently, and we said, and it's on video and it's on audio. We said that what we thought was conspiracies that we used to get laughed at back in the day. Now we're knowing they were laughing at the wrong people. They should have been looking in the mirror, laughing at themselves, because the people that were, talking about this stuff are the ones that actually were telling the truth. A lot of them. Yeah, some made stuff up. Like there's, people that hoax over the years, lie to make themselves famous, sell books, documentaries. There's names I won't go out there, and I've debunked several of them. But out of respect, I don't like, talk about them much, because they say that no haters will hate, and I don't want to be labeled a hater. But the fact is, a lot of it is true, and a lot of it is scary because of the technology that they possess. But and I think you and I will agree, Rich, on this. If they have such an advancement in technology, and we're still here, I don't think they want to kill us. I don't think that's the agenda. What do you think?
They've had plenty of time to do anything they wanted, and they've not really had any apparent interest to go land in any country and say, here we are, either. So we don't know what their agenda is. I mean, to some extent, obviously, you could look at it and say that the deactivating nuclear missiles up in up in Malmstrom, 20 of them actually go offline. Or the some of the other incidents, like in Bentwaters in 1980, or in Russia, where they actually activated missiles. There's a definite intent that's there that we've looked at and did a study, and it's on our website, where we've done nuclear intentions, and we're looking and finding out that these things are showing up conveniently at all of our nuclear, the places where we build them, the places where we get the plutonium, that we develop that, or the storage areas, or the missiles, or the detonation sites, and things like that. And we're finding out that these things have a desire to go at least visit those places at least once to see the full process of what we're doing. And then, you've got, like I said, the deactivation of the missiles up in Malmstrom. Well, are they sending a message? Quit playing with nukes, or or you're stupid, or what the heck, what's the matter with you? That's a clear intent. And so at least we know that they're sending a message. The other part of that is that we see them being detected a lot right now in our military ranges and military locations. And so now it's a question of, so is that surveillance, reconnaissance, like we think of it? Are they just monitoring us? Are they watching our progress? And they seem to be doing that around the planet, not just here, but elsewhere around the planet. And so the big question of the day is, like, what's that about? Because they see that, again, we're stupid, we're going to blow up ourselves, we're going to do something stupid, that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, even if you look at encounters where you have people in other countries who see beings associated with a craft, isn't it interesting that they're always talking in the language, maybe mentally, with whoever it is that they're talking to, in all these different languages around the planet? And so that would show that they've got an understanding of our languages. If you look at the Nimitz case, you saw what you would call precognitive intelligence, maybe, where it actually now knows that Fravor, when he's going to leave the scene after he did the dive after the object and it shot and went to his cap point. Well, how does it know where the cap point is? And it had to have been, picking, and knows that. And so you're running across something that is very much knowledgeable about, again, us. And if they've been here throughout history, they already know every language. They know the problems that are going on. They know what we're doing that's stupid. And, again, just, hey, the idiots up there are doing nukes. We need to go up and send them a message. Or, they're doing this, and let's just come out of the water and go give them a little bit of a heads up. So that's the kind of like thing that we keep seeing over in terms of their behavior, that which we're trying to get our arms around and say like, well, what's this about?
I got Simon here on the PSN chat. He wants to know, what do you think of crop circles? And he knows that some of them have been debunked and people have come forward saying they did it,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of them that he says look very credible. What are your thoughts on crop circles?
Well, let me start off. I have not investigated a crop circle case, but I have talked to people and I've read stuff about crop circles, and I agree. You got the ones that run around where they create fake crop circles. They stomp. There was those two guys that were doing that over in the UK at one point. But then you also have some very interesting evidence that indicates that there's a little bit more to it. For example, you might see some heat in the nodules in the wheat. There was some sort of a heating that went on. And
they weren't broken or bent normally.
Yeah.
I mean, things almost look like they were melted and got tilted.
And so they're deformed, and so that's some rather interesting stuff. But let me also characterize it in this way: that I investigated a case in Carrollton, Ohio, not of a crop circle, but it was a circle. But this is where an object that was 70 foot in diameter came down, apparently in the middle of the wheat field, and it basically baked the soil 2 feet in depth. It removed all of the roots and all of the actual growth of the wheat. And on the outer perimeter, there was a 70 foot in diameter area where there was puffed wheat. Now, again, going back to the heating up, and it's like a microwave kind of radiation that's being used.
Yeah.
So is that what's also being seen in some of the things you might experience over in the UK with crop circles? And we just don't know. I just don't know. I've not connected the dots on that. But again, that was a case where, and we've had other cases, for example, like in Canada, I remember that there was a case where 5 objects were like in tall grassy area. And then I guess a farmer was up on some sort of combine or something like that, and was seeing that there were these disc-shaped. They were swirling around in the grass.
Like they were like little light bulbs. Yeah.
And one by one they pop. And then they shoot off. Well, again, there's physical evidence cases, even like Delphos, Kansas, where it glowed 4 nights. So the soil became hydrophobic, meaning that you poured buckets of water and it would roll off the sides. It wouldn't become mud at all. And so we see that same kind of heating going on, which indicates that there might be something about the propulsion system that they're using, or a field around the craft where it's, for example, sometimes when you see these objects glowing, it's probably the field, like a field where it's interacting with our atmosphere, and it's building up a heat potential, and it causes photons to be emitted, and then you get light being emitted. And it's also explained sometimes why you might have a distortion when you have photographs. They're always blurry. Well, guess what? They're always blurry because you're now looking through a field.
You're right. Then a lot of photographs, people are like scared. They don't want to be abducted, but they're like, I gotta take some pictures. I gotta prove this, and they that happens. That's human nature.
Yeah, even Commander Slate, who was if you take a look at the Nimitz case, you had the Commander Fravor in one aircraft, and then you had the female aviator Alex Dietrich, and she was the pilot in the other F-18, and then behind there was Commander Slate, and the two of these F-18s were going after this Tic Tac. Well, Slate was in the upper berth F-18. Let's say about 20,000 feet or something like that, while Fravor was doing his dive with the Tic Tac and then coming back up. Well, he had a good perspective of the object when it stopped, and then it shot off to the cap point. And he described, and this is very, very key, he described it as being like there was like a mirage-like effect around the Tic Tac, right? A mirage-like effect. Again, going back to that field or that distortion that you experience around there. So here's a trained pilot who is now detecting the fact that there's some sort of a field of something around the object that, again, we need to be mindful that might help us to understand how does the object, go from 20,000 feet to stop above the water in 0.78 of 1 second.
And it just stops exactly where there without any hesitation. It's crazy.
So now you're talking about 1 what, 44,000 miles an hour. You're talking about a Mach 50 and above.
Yeah, and the human body will become like liquefied
Yeah,
and that kind of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, I mean, we want to survive
Inert.
this.
So they've
Yeah.
got a means to be able to get rid of inertia,
Hmm.
which we don't understand.
Yeah.
That they're also able to not have a sonic boom. They're not they're not heating up in the atmosphere, and well, everything we know, hypersonic speeds, the whole, you know, uh,
Shebang.
it
Yeah.
heats up.
Yeah. You
So
know, I wanted to ask you this because there's two things that always, blew my mind in movies, and this actually deals with a movie that came out in the '80s called Explorers. I don't remember that movie, kids movie. It had I think Corey Feldman was in it. Uh, River Phoenix was in it. The kids actors, the young actors from the '80s, and Ethan Hawke was in this also. Really good cast. When they
yeah,
grew up, they're amazing
sounds like
actors.
a cast. Yeah.
But that movie dealt with kids who got a signal from somewhere out there, and they put together a little like ball-looking ship. And the way they were able to get off the ground was by creating a force field around them. And this
Hmm.
field, it was an anti-gravity field, did exactly those maneuvers, crazy things. And that movie cost a lot of money to make that back in the '80s. And that leads me to think, and I've always thought this, that Hollywood is being told certain things to put in movies because that just came out of nowhere. And when you look at it, you're like, that's exactly if I was an alien race, how I would travel inside of a field where gravity is controlled. Nothing's going to come through and hurt you. You'll be able to travel through the stars without any problems, whether you want to go far or near, as long as you can, not liquefy the people inside, but keeping the gravity proper, you control the issue. That movie dealt with it in the mid '80s. Now, Travis Walton's case also deals with something very similar. He was knocked back 20 feet when he got close to the object. When I interviewed him, and we talked about this on air and off air, I've always maintained that he walked into a field of energy. And
Hmm.
it's not like they pinpointed and said, we got to take the human out and, lasers at them. No, he just
Right.
walked into the thing, like,
Yeah.
like, oops, and knocked them back. And I've maintained this over the years. And I told Travis, I said, Travis, I don't think they abducted you. I think they took you to revive you because
That's
you accidentally
yeah.
walked into your own death. And they
Yeah.
were like, "This guy's gonna die. What do we do?" Well, we weren't here to abduct him. We were like probably just dumping waste, and we were gonna leave. And now we got to take this guy. So I think that also shows a little bit of humanity, I guess, in these beings, because they
Hmm.
could just easily left him there and left, but they took him, fixed him, brought him back. He's been in great health ever since, and,
Yeah.
and I've talked to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I kept logging for years, and I kept doing this and that, and after everything calmed down a little bit, I retired as a professional logger and." All credible. He's passed lie detector tests, the entire thing. I think as far as being taken, he's one of the most credible individuals you're ever going to talk to. But the force field around the ship is important because they even went back to the spot years later where the incident happened, and they still found radiation in that area, and the trees were
Yeah.
affected in that
Yeah.
area. Exactly where they said, yeah, the object was right there. The trees are still affected. You can still see a ring around the area where they said the ship was hovering over. I mean, the whole thing kind of leads you to believe that that is a form of travel.
Mhm.
Even Bob Lazar, which is another question I have here in the chat room, which I wanted to ask you about Bob Lazar and your thoughts on him. But even when he described what he described, he said, yeah, it has like kind of an energy field, lifts off the ground, tilts a certain way. So when you see them flying, it's like belly first. That's how they fly. And what do we see in some of these Pentagon footages? The exact thing that he was talking about years ago. Bob Lazar said exactly what they're saying, and we're seeing on the Pentagon footage. We're seeing some of these objects flying in a certain direction. I mean, it's amazing. And of course, Element 115, the whole thing. I mean, what are your thoughts on Bob Lazar at this point, all these years later?
Yeah, to me, it's like one of those things where it's like, how do I want to say it? It's like a distraction that we'll never be able to really get any evidence on, or prove yes or no or whatever. And I'd rather be spending my time studying cases where we can actually get some legitimate data about the object,
Mhm.
right? And so, again, like I talked before, it's like you can hear stories, but if you can't come forward with anything significant, then maybe then you have to question it. And like the element 115 or like that. I mean, there was back in that day, the periodic table was empty around that whole area, and
Yeah.
and I could pick 116 and say it was something. The other thing is that you know I do find it rather interesting that he did talk about the craft doing this,
Right.
kind of like rotation. And if you take a look at it, we do see that rotation kind of pattern in a number of cases. In fact, you
Mhm.
saw it in Australia in a photograph that was taken where it did this kind of thing. It's moving this way.
Right.
Then you look at the gimbal in the video there where it's starting to do this rotation and stuff like that. There have been other cases where it does that kind of thing. And if you think about it, I mean, again, going back to the fact, what can you do like that we have and expect to be able to go through the atmosphere? Nothing, right?
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing, right? So it's interesting and very curious that you can get a case where you can get that rotational pattern. And we're even seeing that with triangle shaped
Mhm.
objects where they can do that. So it's like, how does it move through the atmosphere? Because it's aerodynamics. It's not aerodynamic to be moving like a disc shape sideways, at all, period,
Right. Yeah.
So it kind of boggles your mind, but that's, there are aspects of some of the stuff that he talks about, which, sound awfully convincing, like that there may be something to it. But again, you run across all those like problems, like Stanton Friedman looking into his background. It didn't make any
Right.
sense. His teachers not knowing him, that he'd have, or not even having records to show that he even went to the school or whatever like that. And
But if they wanted to hide somebody's information, I mean, the government could easily do that, and that's
oh
one of the things that me and Stanton got into, and I
yeah,
understand like his point of view. He was not a believer at all.
yeah,
No,
no, no,
about Lazar.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know a number of them, people else, that they're also very clearly anti Bob Lazar. And
Yeah.
again, to me, it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, it's a great story, it's good stuff, but what can we get from it? And again, is that going to carry us forward, or is this just going to be one of those things that's out there? And I'd rather spend my time looking at some good cases like the
Yeah.
Aguadilla case or some of the other cases where you have some evidence where we can get an understanding of the objects, right?
Yeah.
And so I focus on the UFO problem and less on all those like distractors that are out there,
Right.
that take me away from studying the objects, right? And so I look kind of like a Lazar as that. He's a distraction that I don't think we'll ever get to really know or get any evidence or whatever.
Proven one way or the other on his story,
Yeah,
but
right.
at least we could say that because of stories like his, the subject has remained prominent, within the media.
Right.
And George Knapp, who interviewed him,
Yep.
did a great interview back in the day.
Yep.
He's talked to him many times. Great guy, George Knapp. Also, I
Yep.
briefly got to know him a little bit over the years. It's fun to talk to a lot of these folks because you get to talk to them in private, and you get a little bit more sense of like the realism behind what they're saying.
Mhm.
But I agree with you. I mean, the stuff that he says, it's great in story,
Yeah.
but there's no meat to it that can prove anything other than there's a story. But the element 115 kind of leads me there. The way they fly, and we're seeing it now, that kind of leads me to believe him a little bit more. Unfortunately, Stanton is no longer with us, so he can comment on that. But I do think that they're at least to his credibility and to like the level of what he did when he came forward, it kept the subject important in the media. It kept us talking about it. And
Yep.
that now, I think, going forward in the future, when we have more and more discussion and the great folks at explorescu.org, like, you guys are doing on the website and with your investigations, you now have more, stuff to actually work on because more and more people are open to the subject. So, I mean, that's always a good positive thing that came out of that. And it's not like the guy, has done like, like the David Icke stuff or the, other folks who've come out and sold millions of books and done hundreds of documentaries and been to lectures.
Yeah.
Bob Lazar's like the most private guy. Like he won't do a radio interview for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, he talks to George Knapp, and that's it. Like, and one or two guys over the years maybe have gotten lucky enough to get him on video. But I mean, the guy's super private. He does know his science. We know that. I mean, he's done rocket work, but then there's a lot of other stuff that I won't get into. One last question I do have for you from the chat, and this is coming from Omar. He wants to know. Going back to crop circles, sorry, the Arecibo reply. Did you ever see that? And what are your thoughts on that?
On the Arecibo, what now? The reply, like the wow signal, or what?
Remember, we sent out a message into space, decoding our DNA, humans,
Yeah.
like our structure on the Earth. And there was a crop circle that came back. Two, in fact. One had the face of a gray, and the other one had like a reply of where they come from. It had a little tiny gray figure in the crop field. That looked really technical. To do that overnight, I don't know. But that's the one that want to know your thoughts on that one, because that's a pretty interesting crop circle in itself.
Yeah, well, again, it's like it's like one of those things where it's like there's a lot of great artwork going on, but if we don't understand what it's trying to tell us, then what good is it?
Yeah.
And then the other part of that equation is like there's been a lot of fantastic artistry that's gone on with some of these things, and I think that it's also one of the things where very complex designs, which, by the way, our computer capabilities now have gotten to the point where they can do some intricate things. And so the big question of the day has always been, for me, it's like, could you have a device that's up in the air that can do this using a computer, or can you have a satellite that's hanging overhead that's got some sort of a capability to do? I don't know. And I don't think that anybody is legitimately saying that they're seeing a beam that's coming down from above. And then it seems to be like, that these things they pop up overnight, like you're pointing out. And it's like very complex and intricate designs. But there's not a lot of like, well, can you get, I have seen some videos where you might say that there was like some sort of like lights that are moving around. I've seen a couple of those, but you would think that we would have something a bit more advanced than that we could use to be able to detect how these things are being done overnight even. And why isn't there a study on these things being done where you have, let's say, a satellite, if you know that it's continuously going on there and it's potentially an alien race, just position a satellite over and continuously monitor. You can be watching with infrared. You could be watching with all different kinds of parts of the spectrum, and just see what's going on the ground. We have satellites that can read the word tight list on a golf course. Okay, so why don't we position a satellite in Earth, a geocentric orbit or something like that above it, and get an answer as opposed to just letting it go on and being dumb about it, right?
Yeah. No, here's the interesting question that you bring: the satellite power we do possess. We have Hubble telescope. We have all these, expensive, tools up in space now. Why is it they only focus on galaxies millions of light years away? Why don't they focus some of that on like closer planets and stars nearby, where they can get a better visual of what we're looking at, and focus in? Like they could literally like probably point Hubble to Mars and see everything that's going on Mars, like clear as day, right? Why don't they do that? Why is it they only look like 40 billion light years away where we have no chance of getting there?
Here's the joke about SETI, right? Here's the joke about SETI. SETI's out there listening for radio communication to come to us from out there, right?
Yeah.
We are not sending anything from here that's a signal out there.
Right.
Okay, wait. So we're not doing it, and we're not sending a signal out there. There's communications going on from our radio stations, but that's whoop-de-doo. But why aren't we sending signals out there doing the same thing instead of us just listening all the time by SETI, right? So to me, it's like incredulous, the fact that you haven't been sending signals out into space, hoping that there'll be a reply back or something of that nature. And it just just boggles my
It boggles the
imagination.
mind. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they put that gold record. Remember on the ship,
Yeah.
talking about the humanity and human
Yep.
race and Earth. They did that a long time ago. We
Good
should be
voyage.
sending more signals saying, "Hey, we're here." If you're friendly, say hi. Make yourself known. And we know you come in peace if you're coming from there to here. But if you can't get here, at least send a signal. Smoke signal, laser signal, whatever you want. Let us see it. But it's true. We're like quiet about it, but we keep listening on radio waves. If there's civilizations out there, millions of years more advanced, do you think they're still using radio waves or any ancient technology like that? They're way beyond that. They That's like us trying to talk to ants in the backyard and like we don't understand the ants.
Yeah.
And the ants are like they have their own radio signal. They're like these beings. I don't know what the heck they are, but they keep yapping away, and we don't understand them. And so forget that, those tall giants, we're going about our business. But we don't know what they're discussing. We know they're really smart. They create, colonies on the ground, the ants. So we know there's intelligence there. They build stuff with intelligence, right?
Right.
Same thing with like other animals. Coco the gorilla. We taught her how to like do sign language, and she could communicate. Robin Williams, before he passed away, went and visited Coco, and there's famous footage of it. And he's there sitting with a gorilla that could tear him apart in 2 seconds. And he's hugging the gorilla. They're talking. The gorilla's saying sign language to him. This is a gorilla that could literally just get Robin Williams and tear his arm off. But there's an understanding where we were able to break through that wall and communicate with this animal.
Mhm.
In the same way, I'm sure aliens could do that with us much easier. They're much more advanced, but they ain't going to be using stuff like radio signals and
Right.
ancient stuff. They're going to be much advanced than that.
And it's often very curious when you go back to the crop circle context is the fact that they seemingly understand, a lot of they do drawings and various things like that we would do from Earth or just our human thinking,
Yeah.
which is rather interesting because if you saw the movie Arrival, remember that the
Mhm.
symbol, the
Yes.
way that to me that's more like believable in the context of an alien race coming here that we don't understand, and we'd have to figure out what the heck the language is or how that they do what they do, and it would be like something like that, right?
Mhm.
But again, let's go back to the context of the objects being on the planet here for throughout time. Then it's very conceivable that they would understand what we put on that platter out in the Voyager or the Voyager, if we were doing other things like that, they would
Right.
understand that, and so there are symbols that they would be creating, and that. But I don't understand why they're choosing all the crops in like maybe the UK. There's been other crop circles in other countries as well, but it seems to be more predominant in the like UK and stuff like that over there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't. Again, it's not one of those things where I spend a lot of my time focusing on that because I'm spending all my time on UFOs.
Yeah.
But
No, crop circles gonna drive you bananas. I mean, there's so much,
yeah,
stuff to look at, and again, it's like we said earlier, a lot of stuff to look at. It's beautiful, but who can we talk to, and where's the meat other than the visual of the crop circle? Where's the evidence?
see more. I think more scientific study could be done on the crop
Yeah,
circle. Again, like I mentioned,
yeah,
utilizing satellites or using other technologies to be able to see what's going on in fields or something like that. That might give an indication. And I don't see a lot of scientific equipment being hauled in to help us to understand it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's where I'm at.
That's the sad part, Rich. We have to let you go. I know we only had you out for an hour tonight, and I love talking to you, man. You're the best of the best of the best of everybody. I love you, man, to death,
I
and
love
I
you.
love Ty. It's captures me every time. But I want you to again talk about explorersSCU.org. Give folks details how they can go and help out as well, because I'm sure there's need
Yep.
for more people, investigators and stuff to join. Give us a little bit more detail. Also, I want you to tell us about anything you have coming up, maybe a speech or something you're going to be involved in, and an event. Anything you have, please go ahead and give us that detail.
We just had our conference. The conference was in June, the end of May and June, and at the beginning of June. a lot of the those videos from this year's will be probably popping up on our. We have a YouTube channel on that you can look into. It's also look up Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. Anyway, the bottom line is that we've got even past conferences there, so you can see the presenters from our past conferences as well on those. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible. All of our papers and our newsletters and things like that are all up on the explorersu.org website. You can keep up with us that way. If you have some questions or you're looking to learn more, there's a contact page that we're always monitoring. I've been helping in a lot of different areas besides just the conferences and stuff like that. I'm going to be speaking at the I think next weekend I'm speaking to the North Dakota MUFON people as well. Their organization is having me on. That's
Cool.
That's one thing coming up. There's a couple other podcasts that I'm going to be doing. I guess the next big thing that I'm aware of is just that we're going to be I'm going to be retiring at the beginning of next year from my Army contracting career, and
wow.
and so that's after 30 years, and I'm planning to now then take and start to develop my own book, and so that'll be a focus for me, and plus just being able to be more active in terms of publishing, a lot of different things that I've been having to hold back on because of that Army career that I've got. So that's a big thing for me anyway, to be able to now focus pretty much all my attention on this subject. We're busy in SCU. We got like a whole bunch of papers that we're getting ready to get published. We have a number of projects that we're looking at, or we're doing actually. One is looking at electromagnetic effects in the atmosphere and in water. We're also looking at those kind of propulsion effects. We just finished a characterization study on shape, and we're going to now carry that over into looking at other aspects over history of the objects. Their ability to make 90-degree turns, the kinematics associated with that, we're going to be studying in our next paper that will be coming out.
Really?
Doing a study on USOs. We're also looking at passive radar. And so a lot of these projects I'm engaged in to some extent but I'm not as much as I'd like to be, and that'll change after this next year.
When you go on that book tour, I want you to be on my show and promote it. And I have a book coming out too. Maybe I'll join you on a tour or something. We'll go lecture about UFOs together somewhere.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be awesome, Nate.
I'll be a whole lot lighter by then, so it'll be easier on my feet.
You'll be able to wear that bow tie because by then you won't have the beard, right?
Right. I might let a Fu Manchu grow. What do you think?
Okay. No, that's still cool. Leave that, and then have a bow tie.
Yeah, there you go. I'll look authentic. I'll look, I'll look presentable, clean shaven, but the Fu Manchu, and I'll be like, I have a Chinese great grandfather. I really do.
Really?
I'm not lying.
No.
No, I'm serious. My great grandfather on my mom's side was Chinese.
Oh,
and
wow.
nobody believes me because they see my glasses and they're like, spectrovision. They see the big eyes, and then I take my glasses off and they're like, holy crap, you're Asian. I'm a Cubasian. I was born in Cuba and I have Asian family. This stuff happens. My family's all kind of mixed, but God bless you, man. You're the best. Thank you again for blessing my show once again with a beautiful bow tie and with your incredible knowledge. I'd love to speak to you again soon. I'm not going away again for 2 years like I've gone in the past. We're going to be sticking to it. My health is getting a little bit better throat-wise, which is, good. Because for a while there I couldn't speak and it got really scary. But now the voice is coming back, and I tend to continue this process into the very end, whether it be my end or the end of disclosure. I'm get full on board with what's really going on. But you're the man. Don't forget that. I love you. You're awesome. And I want you to be back here on the show very soon, and especially when you're promoting your book. And it's on Plex. Make sure you watch the movie Explorers.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Watch it. If you haven't seen it since the 80s or you've never seen it, awesome movie. It's a kid's movie, but it's awesome movie. It's like
No, I
Flight
love
of the
it.
Navigator. Awesome. I don't even
Yeah.
remember that.
Oh, I remember that. I loved Cocoon, and all those things.
Yes.
Those
Yeah.
are all
Yeah.
great shows, right? Those are
Yeah.
awesome.
Great. Great movies. Rich, have yourself a great evening, my friend. Everybody, again, remember Explorers, explorerscu.org. Make
Yes.
sure you go there, bookmark the website, follow along with what Mr. Hoffman here is working on. And till next time, my friend, stay healthy, stay, alert, keep focusing on the skies, keep doing your research. We need you to keep doing your work because you're one of the few guys that I know keeps it real, keeps it honest, and you're one of my favorite human beings. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I really do. Love you, my friend.
I love you. Thank you so much for having me on, Angel. Good to see you again.
And have yourself a blessed evening and take care of you and bless your family also. Lovely people.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Folks, that's all for the show tonight. We ran a little bit over because, again, this is an amazing person I have on. But until next time, next week, we'll be back on Inside the Jackal's Head. Angel Espino, this is my show. Make sure you tune in. And it'll be live once again on PSN Radio and SoFlo Radio. Till then, love y'all. Peace. Stay real, stay alive, stay healthy, and by all means, stay focused on the skies. Till next time, take care, everybody. Good night.